Dana White just up and walked off the Howie Mandel podcast, basically before it began. And I know you've seen this by now. We just haven't been able to get to the podcast till today. Dana White goes on to Howie Mandel's podcast. Howie Mandel does this 1 minute introduction of how great Dana White is and all this stuff, and he's going on and on and on, and it finally goes to Dana White, and he says, that's it, I'm tired of doing podcasts, and basically, I'm out of here. He takes off the headset, he walks off, and that's it. And they're left stunned. Howie Mandel's left stunned. And my first thought when I saw this is, come on, Howie, get to Dana White. This is ridiculous. And then Dana White walks off, and I'm kind of stunned too, but I'm like, this looks staged to me. It looks like it's fake. Other people were saying the same thing. But in hindsight, maybe it wasn't staged. Maybe it was real. Maybe Dana White is just sick of doing podcasts. I don't know. I'm caught in between. But of course, people are weighing in on this topic, of course. Absolutely. A lot to talk about on this one. Because you got to go on these podcasts, and then these hosts on these podcasts sit there and give you this long introduction. It's like, I'm more with Joe Rogan on this one. It's all unnecessary. Like, just start talking right away. Ask Dana White a question as he's putting headphones on. Don't even give him time to sit down. Start asking questions. I love when Howard Stern does the same thing. Just go right into it, man. Everybody knows who Dana White is. There's no need for an introduction. And he doesn't want to waste a minute if he's got a busy schedule and doing all this stuff. And then have to go and say, thank you, Howie. Thank you for the introduction. Oh, it's a pleasure to be here. Yeah, it's just fluff. It's fake. So that's what makes it tricky, is it might not have been staged, in the sense that that's just how Dana White is. And that's what we love him for. Even when we get on to Dana White, which we rarely do, we're usually on his side in terms of fighter pay, in terms of how he approaches the media and the ridiculous questions he is asked and then has to answer sometimes. It's just, you just love Dana White and the reactions. Love it. And if he wants to walk off the podcast, fine. I wish he would come on my podcast and walk off. Because that's instant, like, promotion. Like, everybody knows that Howie Mandel has a podcast now. I didn't know. I didn't know Howie Mandel had a podcast. Did you? Maybe you did. I certainly had no idea that he had a podcast.
Are you serious?
Yes. Yes, I had no idea.
Serious?
Yeah. So if he comes on our podcast and Dana White walks off, everyone's going to know who the TCMMA podcast is. Everyone's going to know who Chris Cross is. I mean, that's just how it goes.
Are you serious?
Yeah. That's the Dana White effect, man. Dana White comes on the show. He just got to stay for 30 seconds. I'll say whatever, and then he just has to get up and walk off.
Dana White privilege.
Yes. Yes, I love it.
Dana White privilege. Privilege. Privilege.
Yeah.
Privilege. Privilege.
Yeah, he could get up and do whatever he wants, man. That's Dana White, man.
Dana White privilege.
He's got the privilege to get up and leave whenever he wants.
Privilege.
He's got the ability to. It's Dana White. It's Dana White. Like, do you think when Dana White leaves the UFC, whenever, hopefully it's not anytime soon, please God, but when he leaves, do you think, like, we'll still watch the press conferences in the same way? If it was just stale and generic? No, we like when Dana White doesn't answer questions or up and walks off the podcast, or that's what we love. It's stuff like that has made the UFC great. The personality of Dana White. And I know everyone loves him in the UFC, right? So he's not going anywhere. But can you imagine if they try to just move on one day to a different person? It's just not going to be the same. And, it's going to happen one day. Just like I'm going to be too old to do podcasts, and however long that is from now. It's just part of it. I mean, the UFC will move on one day, but it's not going to be fun, man. It's going to be a rough day when Dana White leaves.
Oh my God, bro.
Because right now, I'm watching the post-fight press conference, not even for the news, but really just to see what Dana White does next, what he says, what questions he finds stupid as heck. What do you think about Jake Paul? What do you think about boxing? What do you think about Bellator? What do you think about all these topics these guys bring up? And Dana White's going to say something outlandish and crazy in a good way, and then people eat it up. I eat it up. I love it. So when he leaves one day, it's going to be crazy. But again, I wish he would come on our podcast and walk off. He's in Dana White. We speak your name. You're invited, man. Well, here we go. People weighing in. This wasn't staged. Howie is mad. This is Canadian passive aggression. Howie's introduction of Dana White was not intended to the flattery. Dana must have said something mean to the other guest, and it rubbed Howie the wrong way. This is what a mad Canadian looks and acts like. Dana's thank you was equally as insincere as Howie's introduction of him. The only way to beat passive aggression is passive aggression. Anything else, and you lose the fight or the argument. Yeah, so I hear you. So it wasn't staged. Yeah, and that's the part that's tricky. Is like, I don't know, man. It really could go either way. I mean, it certainly can go either way. Pablo says you can tell by the look on their faces it wasn't staged. All right, so 2-0. Delma Roberts says, nah, no way it's staged, Dana White. Don't get down like that. That's not his style. You could tell he was generally pissed. And without seeing the video before, it almost looks like he's pissed because of the long introduction. And you guys are saying, one of you saying passive aggression, and that Dana White doesn't do that. And I agree with you. I tend to agree with you. So there's probably something on the video before that we don't get to see, obviously, that happens. And what Howie's other guy in there, whoever that was, he said, I could see you guys are getting along real well. So there is something there that must have happened. It's interesting. There's something there that must have happened. That's Dana. No time for bull. If not staged, they're now showing everything. And that's the point. There's something else there that we don't get to see. There's just something that we don't get to see. But yeah, at the end of the day, man, Dana White just took off. Howie kept looking at the camera while blowing smoke up his butt and repeating himself. The co-hosts were off to especially the guy he said was getting along with him. Yeah, exactly. This is definitely a Dana White thing. This is most certainly not staged because all it does is make Howie's pod look bad. I don't know, man. Bad press is good press. I didn't even know Howie Mandel had a podcast until Dana White walked off of it. I mean, this is what I'm trying to tell you. This is good for Howie Mandel. I mean, if you know how to take this type of news and spin it and in your favor and not come out and answer questions like people expect you to and just say, listen, I was shocked he walked off and just stick with other stuff. You know, go more with against the grain is what I'm trying to get at. Don't go with the basic premise. Look at this like, hey, I'm getting a bunch of free promotion, man. People that didn't even know how to podcast don't have a podcast. Because, listen, again, I didn't know. I had no idea that he had a podcast until Dana White walked off of it. So it doesn't make it look bad. It makes people say, oh, wow, he's got a podcast. If half of those people go and watch it one time, it's a great thing. Because then if he's any good, people are going to keep listening. So any press is good press, my man. Any press is good press.
He's gonna fight, wait, he's gonna fight, wait, hold your breath till the end of the night. Last fighter call, UFC at its height, yeah. Bringing that thunder with all his might, saying step up, wanna fight, hold up, think twice, gladiator, assassin, reckless, no abandon, walk through that cage, he'll leave your ass stranded, wake up, hey, where you at, hey, got hit in the head with a baseball bat.